a gentle opening about how even the strongest teams can quietly unravel, moments when chemistry fades, injuries accumulate, and championships slip away. Tonight, we explore 4 collapses that remind us how fragile success can be and how peacefully we can reflect on them. The summer of 2010 changed basketball forever. Not with a quiet announcement or a simple press conference, but with a television special that drew millions of eyes. LeBron James, the greatest player of his generation, sat under bright lights and uttered 4 words that shifted the entire landscape of professional basketball. He was taking his talents to South Beach. The decision, as it became known, wasn't just a career move. It was a statement, a declaration that the old rules no longer applied. Players could choose their own destiny, form their own super teams, and chase championships on their own terms. Miami had positioned itself perfectly. Dwayne Wade, already a champion and finals MVP, was the cornerstone. Chris Bosh, an elite power forward from Toronto, committed alongside LeBron. 3 all-stars in their prime. 3 players who could dominate games in different ways. The Heat introduced them with smoke and lights and grand promises. Not 1 championship, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. The words echoed through the arena. Confidence bordering on arrogance, expectation reaching impossible heights. The basketball world watched with fascination and skepticism in equal measure. The regular season revealed the complexity of their challenge. Winning didn't come as easily as expected. Early losses piled up. Role players struggled to find their identity. The offense often looked stagnant, 3 stars taking turns rather than playing as one. But championship teams aren't built in October or November. They're forged through adversity, through learning painful lessons, through discovering what works when the pressure rises. Miami found its rhythm eventually. The defense improved. LeBron and Wade learned to coexist. By spring, the Heat looked dangerous. By June, they were in the NBA Finals. The Dallas Mavericks stood in their way. Dirk Nowitzki, playing at an extraordinary level, led a veteran team that believed in itself despite being considered underdogs. Most analysts favored Miami. The talent gap seemed too wide. The Heat had won the Eastern Conference. They had proven they could win when it mattered. But the finals exposed something troubling, something that would define this collapse and haunt LeBron for years to come. The fourth quarters belonged to Dallas. One after another, as games reached their crucial moments, Miami's offense dissolved into confusion and hesitation. LeBron, who had carried Cleveland to the finals years earlier, seemed uncertain. In the fourth quarter of Game 2, he attempted just 1 shot. In Game 4, he scored 2 points in the final period. Observers struggled to understand what they were witnessing. This was the best player in the world, disappearing when his team needed him most. The criticism grew louder with each passing game. Dwayne Wade tried to shoulder the burden. Chris Bosh contributed where he could. But championship teams need their best player to be great in the biggest moments, and LeBron fell short. Game 6 in Miami offered redemption. The Heat could force a Game 7 and salvage the series. The home crowd brought deafening energy. But Dallas played with calm determination. Dirk scored when necessary. Jason Terry hit impossible shots. The Mavericks' role players made winning plays. And when the final buzzer sounded, Dallas celebrated on Miami's home court. The Heat walked off defeated, their promise of multiple championships replaced by the quiet reality of failure. LeBron left the arena without speaking to reporters. The image of him leaving early, head down, became symbolic of the collapse. The aftermath brought intense scrutiny. Critics questioned LeBron's mental toughness. They compared him unfavorably to Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, champions who elevated their games in finals pressure. Some fans celebrated his failure, viewing it as karmic justice for the decision's perceived arrogance. LeBron faced a choice. He could deflect blame or accept responsibility. He could make excuses or acknowledge his shortcomings. In the months that followed, he chose the harder path. He worked on his post-game. He studied film obsessively. He prepared mentally for the moment he would inevitably return to this stage. The collapse of 2011 wasn't just a lost championship. It was a public humbling, a reminder that talent alone doesn't guarantee success, that confidence must be earned through performance, not declared through promises. Many observers say the defeat shaped LeBron's career more than any of his victories. It taught him patience. It revealed his vulnerabilities. It forced him to grow in ways that comfort never could. The Heat would return to the finals the following year, better prepared, more mature, hungry to erase the memory of Dallas.
Looking back, some fans believe the collapse was necessary, that Miami's dynasty, which would eventually produce 2 championships, required that initial failure to truly understand what winning demanded. The Big Three needed to learn they couldn't simply overwhelm opponents with talent. They needed system, sacrifice, trust, and mental toughness. LeBron needed to confront his demons in the most public forum possible. The lesson came at a painful cost, but it came. And when Miami finally broke through in 2012, the joy was sweeter because they remembered how bitter 2011 had tasted. The legacy of that first season collapse extends beyond championships won or lost. It represents a turning point in how we understand pressure and greatness. LeBron's finals performance became a cautionary tale about the gap between potential and achievement. But it also demonstrated that failure, when embraced and learned from, can become the foundation for future success. The Heat didn't collapse because they lacked talent. They collapsed because they weren't yet ready for the moment. And sometimes that's the most valuable lesson a team can learn. The Los Angeles Lakers entered the 2003 to 2004 season with championship certainty radiating from every corner of the organization. They had just come off a disappointing finals loss to San Antonio, but the front office responded with overwhelming force. They signed Karl Malone, a 2-time MVP, and one of the greatest power forwards in basketball history. They added Gary Payton, a Hall of Fame point guard and defensive specialist.
Combined with Shaq and Kobe, two players at the absolute peak of their powers, the Lakers assembled arguably the most talented starting lineup ever constructed. The mathematics seemed impossible to overcome. 4 future Hall of Famers, all still capable of dominating games. Shaq remained the most physically imposing center in basketball. Kobe was evolving into a complete offensive force. Malone brought toughness and consistency. Payton provided defensive pressure and playmaking. On paper, no team could match their firepower. The Western Conference looked weak by comparison. The Eastern Conference offered no real threat. Championship number 4 for the Shaq and Kobe dynasty appeared inevitable. Fans and media treated the regular season as a formality, a patient wait for the playoffs to begin. But championship teams require more than talent. They require chemistry, health, timing, and a little bit of fortune. The Lakers struggled with all of these elements. Karl Malone, at 40 years old, wasn't the player who had terrorized opponents for 2 decades. His body showed wear from years of brutal playoff battles. Gary Payton, adjusting to a reduced role, looked uncomfortable within the triangle offense. He was accustomed to controlling games with the ball in his hands, but Phil Jackson's system demanded sacrifice and movement. The adjustment never fully materialized. More troubling than individual struggles was the tension simmering beneath the surface. Shaq and Kobe's relationship, already strained, continued deteriorating. They barely spoke to each other outside of necessary basketball communications. Shaq felt Kobe was too selfish, too focused on his own legacy. Kobe believed Shaq wasn't working hard enough, wasn't maintaining his conditioning, wasn't earning his massive contract. The resentment grew with each passing month. Teammates chose sides. The locker room fractured. Carl Jackson, masterful at managing egos, found even his considerable skills tested. The regular season produced 56 wins, respectable but underwhelming given the talent. Malone missed games with various injuries. Chemistry issues plagued the offense. Defensive intensity came and went. Still, the Lakers remained favorites entering the playoffs. They understood that regular season performance meant little. Champions are crowned in June, not February. The playoffs began promisingly. They defeated Houston in 5 games. They swept San Antonio in the second round, avenging the previous year's finals loss. The Western Conference Finals against Minnesota offered little resistance. The Lakers were back in the finals, facing the Detroit Pistons. Detroit arrived as significant underdogs. They had no superstar to match Shaq or Kobe. Their roster consisted of solid players who defended intensely and played team basketball. Chauncey Billups, Richard Hamilton, Rasheed Wallace, Ben Wallace, and Tayshaun Prince. Good players, but not great ones, according to conventional wisdom. Larry Brown, their coach, preached defensive discipline and unselfish offense. The Pistons believed in their system even as most analysts dismissed their chances. They had upset Indiana in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, they faced the Lakers' star power. Game 1 in Los Angeles should have established dominance. Instead, Detroit won comfortably, 87-75. The Lakers' offense looked confused against Detroit's aggressive defense. Shaq struggled with double and triple teams. Kobe forced difficult shots. The role players stood and watched. Game 2 offered no improvement. Detroit won again, 99-91. The series shifted to Detroit, with the Pistons holding a 2-0 advantage. Suddenly, the inevitable championship looked uncertain. The Lakers won Game 3, barely avoiding disaster. Kobe scored 33 points, carrying an offense that generated little else. But Games 4 and 5 belonged entirely to Detroit. The Pistons' defense smothered every Lakers possession. They rotated perfectly. They helped aggressively. They forced Los Angeles into contested jumpers and turnovers. Ben Wallace dominated Shaq defensively, a shocking development given their size difference. Tayshaun Prince guarded Kobe with relentless energy. The Lakers' stars couldn't overcome Detroit's collective effort. Game 5 in Detroit ended with a whimper rather than a bang. The Pistons won 100-87, celebrating a championship on their home court, while the Lakers trudged to the locker room in defeat. The post-game scene captured the collapse perfectly. Shaq and Kobe barely acknowledged each other. Phil Jackson looked exhausted. Karl Malone, playing through a serious knee injury, sat devastated, knowing his championship window had likely closed. Gary Payton, at 35 years old, faced the same reality. The superteam had failed spectacularly. The aftermath proved even more damaging than the loss itself. Phil Jackson announced he wouldn't return as coach. Shaq demanded a trade, unwilling to continue alongside Kobe. The Lakers, choosing youth over experience, traded Shaq to Miami that summer. The dynasty ended not with celebration, but with bitter recrimination. Karl Malone retired without the championship ring that had eluded him for 19 seasons. Gary Payton left for Miami, eventually winning a championship there in 2006. The Lakers entered a brief rebuilding phase before Kobe led them to 2 more titles in 2009 and 2010.
According to reports, the collapse stemmed from multiple factors. The age of Malone and Payton mattered more than expected. The chemistry issues proved insurmountable when facing adversity. Detroit's superior teamwork exposed the Lakers' reliance on individual talent. Some observers say the failure taught valuable lessons about team construction, that collecting stars doesn't guarantee success, that chemistry and health and timing matter as much as talent. The 2004 Lakers possessed everything except what mattered most when championships are decided. The legacy of this collapse resonates through NBA history. It represents the danger of assuming talent conquers all challenges. The Lakers had 4 Hall of Famers and couldn't beat a team with none. They had the most dominant center in basketball and lost to defensive discipline. They had championship experience and fell to hungry underdogs. The lesson settled into the collective consciousness of front offices everywhere. Building super teams requires more than signing star players. It requires vision, patience, and understanding that basketball remains a team sport regardless of individual greatness. The Boston Celtics approached the 2018 to 2019 season with justified optimism. They had reached the Eastern Conference Finals the previous year without their two best players. Kyrie Irving missed the entire playoffs, recovering from knee surgery. Gordon Hayward was still rehabilitating from a devastating ankle injury. Yet the young core of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, and Marcus Smart had pushed LeBron's Cavaliers to 7 games. The future looked extraordinarily bright. When Kyrie and Gordon returned healthy, Boston would become the East's dominant force. Kyrie Irving brought undeniable talent and championship experience. He had hit the title-winning shot for Cleveland in 2016. He was one of the league's most skilled offensive players, capable of scoring from anywhere on the court. His handle was supernatural, his finishing ability unmatched. Boston had traded for him the previous summer, giving up Isaiah Thomas and valuable assets. The move made sense strategically. Pair a superstar point guard with an elite coach in Brad Stevens and talented young players. Championships would follow naturally. Gordon Hayward's return added another dimension. Before his injury, he was an all-star, a complete player who could score, pass, and defend. His basketball IQ complemented Kyrie's creativity. The roster looked balanced and deep. Al Horford provided veteran leadership and high-level center play. Marcus Morris gave them toughness. Marcus Smart brought defensive intensity and winning intangibles. On paper, Boston could match up with anyone. The media predicted 55 to 60 wins. Many analysts favored them to reach the finals.
But chemistry cannot be manufactured through talent alone. It must be cultivated through shared struggle, through sacrifice, through players subordinating individual goals for collective success. The previous year's playoff success had given the young players confidence and expanded roles. Now they were asked to step back, to accept reduced minutes, to defer to Kyrie and Gordon. The adjustment created tension immediately. Terry Rozier, who had played brilliantly in the playoffs, returned to a backup role. He grew frustrated, expressing his desire for more opportunities publicly. Kyrie's mood shifts became a storyline. Some games he appeared engaged and dominant. Other games he seemed distant, disconnected from his teammates. Reports surfaced about his impending free agency. Would he stay in Boston or leave for New York or elsewhere? The uncertainty poisoned the locker room stability. Players didn't know if they were building something lasting or waiting for their best player to abandon them.
Brad Stevens, known for creating cohesive teams, struggled to manage the personalities and expectations. The regular season produced mixed results. Boston won 49 games, solid but disappointing given their talent. They lost games they should have won. The offense often looked stagnant, players standing around watching Kyrie dribble. The defensive intensity that had defined them the previous year disappeared for long stretches. Arguments on the court became visible. Body language revealed frustration. What should have been a joyful season became a grind. The young players who had exceeded expectations now looked confused and unhappy.
Kyrie's public comments created additional problems. He promised to re-sign with Boston, then later seemed to walk back his commitment. He criticized younger teammates for not understanding what it takes to win, despite them having pushed Cleveland to 7 games without him. The comments landed poorly. Veterans like Marcus Smart, who had bled for the organization, bristled at the implications. The divide between Kyrie and the rest of the roster grew wider. Some observers noted that championship teams require unity, and Boston clearly lacked it. The playoffs exposed every flaw. Milwaukee eliminated them in 5 games during the second round. Boston looked lifeless and disorganized. Kyrie shot terribly, making just 31% of his attempts. The young players who had starred the previous year barely contributed. There was no fight, no resilience, no belief. They simply lost. Their talent wasted by dysfunction and bad vibes. The final game felt almost merciful, an end to a season that had promised so much and delivered so little. The aftermath brought brutal honesty. Kyrie admitted the season was disappointing and took responsibility for his role in the failure. Then he left for Brooklyn in free agency, as many had suspected he would. Al Horford also departed, signing with Philadelphia. Terry Rozier went to Charlotte. The team that was supposed to dominate the East for years disbanded after a single disappointing season. Danny Ainge, Boston's president, was left to rebuild around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, the young players who had been asked to sacrifice and then were blamed when things fell apart. Many observers say the 2018 to 2019 Celtics represent a cautionary tale about talent without cohesion. They had everything except what mattered most, a shared commitment to team success over individual achievement. Kyrie's brilliance couldn't overcome his mood swings and uncertain commitment. Gordon's return didn't restore him to all-star form. The young players couldn't replicate their previous success in reduced roles. Brad Stevens, one of the best coaches in basketball, couldn't solve the puzzle. Sometimes, chemistry cannot be forced or manufactured. The collapse taught valuable lessons about team building, that talent must be complemented by character and commitment, that young players need clear roles and consistent opportunities, that star players must buy into the team's culture completely, not conditionally, that uncertainty about the future poisons present performance. Boston had assembled the pieces for a championship contender and watched it crumble due to internal dysfunction. The failure stung deeply because it felt preventable, because the talent was clearly sufficient if only the collective will had matched it. The legacy of the season extends beyond Boston's specific situation. It influences how teams evaluate potential acquisitions, how they weigh talent against character, how they consider team chemistry in roster construction. The Celtics had one of the most talented rosters in the league and won exactly 0 playoff rounds. They underperformed so dramatically that it became a case study in what not to do. And while Boston would eventually recover, building around Tatum and Brown and reaching the finals a few years later, the memory of 2018 to 2019 lingered as a reminder of opportunity wasted.
The Seattle SuperSonics entered the 1996 NBA Finals as worthy challengers to the Chicago Bulls' dominance. Gary Payton, the league's best defensive point guard, was playing at an MVP level. Sean Kemp, an explosive power forward with supernatural athleticism, dominated the paint. Detlef Schrempf provided veteran savvy and offensive versatility. Sam Perkins stretched the floor with outside shooting. Head coach George Karl had built a complete team, one that won 64 games during the regular season and steamrolled through the Western Conference playoffs. Chicago, led by Michael Jordan in his first full season back from retirement, was heavily favored. But Seattle didn't fear them. The Sonics had the defensive personnel to make Jordan work for every point. They had the athleticism to match Chicago's speed. They had home court advantage. The finals opened in Seattle, and the Sonics won Game 1, stunning the basketball world. They weren't intimidated, they were competing. Gary Payton guarded Michael Jordan with ferocious intensity. Sean Kemp threw down thunderous dunks. For one game, Seattle looked like champions. Then reality asserted itself. The Bulls won the next 3 games, adapting to Seattle's defensive pressure and finding ways to score. The Bulls were simply better, deeper, more experienced. Michael Jordan, driven by the desire to prove his championship pedigree hadn't diminished, played with ruthless efficiency. The series returned to Seattle, with Chicago leading 3-1. The Sonics won Game 5 at home, extending the series. But Game 6 in Chicago ended Seattle's championship hopes. The Bulls won their 4th title. The Sonics flew home disappointed but proud of their effort.
The expectation for the following season was clear. Seattle would return stronger, more experienced, ready to challenge again. They brought back essentially the same roster. Gary Payton was entering his prime. Sean Kemp was only 27 years old, still ascending. The Western Conference looked vulnerable. Utah was aging. Houston was transitioning. Los Angeles was rebuilding. San Antonio, though talented, hadn't yet become a dynasty. Seattle appeared positioned to return to the finals, this time with the wisdom gained from their previous experience. But championship windows are fragile. They require not just talent, but also hunger, focus, and fortune. The 1996-97 Sonics lacked the urgency that had defined their previous season. The regular season revealed troubling signs. They won 57 games, solid, but 7 fewer than the previous year. Gary Payton remained excellent, but subtle chemistry issues began emerging.
Shawn Kemp's focus wavered. Contract negotiations loomed, creating uncertainty. The team that had played with joy and intensity now seemed to be going through the motions at times.
The playoffs exposed their complacency. As the defending Western Conference champions and the second seed, Seattle faced the seventh-seeded Phoenix Suns in the first round. Phoenix, led by Kevin Johnson and a young Jason Kidd, played with desperation. They had nothing to lose and everything to prove. The series went to 5 games, with Phoenix winning the deciding game in Seattle. The Sonics season ended in stunning fashion. The team that had pushed Michael Jordan's Bulls to 6 games in the finals couldn't win a first-round series against a lower seed. The loss revealed multiple problems. Seattle's defense, which had been elite, struggled to contain Phoenix's guards. The offensive rhythm that had powered them to 64 wins the previous year disappeared for long stretches. Shawn Kemp looked unfocused, his body language suggesting frustration with contract situations. Gary Payton, despite his individual excellence, couldn't elevate his teammates the way championship leaders must. George Karl's coaching, so effective the previous year, couldn't solve the puzzle. The Sonics simply weren't ready to compete when it mattered. The aftermath proved devastating to the franchise's championship hopes. Shawn Kemp, disappointed with his contract situation, demanded a trade. The relationship between him and the organization deteriorated beyond repair. Seattle traded him to Cleveland the following summer, receiving an underwhelming package in return. The chemistry and athleticism that had defined the Sonics' identity vanished. Gary Payton remained, still playing at an all-star level, but the supporting cast never matched the talent of the 1995 to 1997 years. According to reports, the collapse stemmed from losing focus after coming so close. The Sonics believed they would have multiple opportunities to win championships. They didn't treat the 1996 to 1997 season with the urgency it required. By the time they realized their mistake, the window had closed. Shawn Kemp left. The roster aged. Chicago continued dominating. San Antonio emerged as a dynasty. Seattle never returned to the finals. The franchise eventually relocated to Oklahoma City, the Sonics' name disappearing from the NBA entirely. Some fans believe the first-round exit represents one of the most disappointing collapses in NBA history because of what it cost the franchise. Seattle had everything necessary to build a sustained contender. They had 2 superstars in their primes. They had a brilliant coach. They had organizational stability. They had a passionate fan base. All they needed was focus and hunger. Instead, they sleepwalked through a season and paid the ultimate price. The collapse wasn't dramatic like other failures. It was quiet, almost inevitable in retrospect, but no less devastating. The legacy of the 1996 to 1997 Sonics serves as a reminder about championship windows. They don't stay open indefinitely.
Teams must seize their opportunities when they arise, because circumstances change quickly in professional sports. Injuries happen, players leave, chemistry dissolves, younger teams emerge. Seattle learned this lesson the hardest way possible. They went from finals contender to first-round exit to dismantled roster in the span of 2 years. The speed of the collapse was shocking, but the causes were clear: complacency and missed opportunity. Looking back, the 1996 to 1997 season represents a turning point in Seattle basketball history. Had they advanced deep into the playoffs, Shawn Kemp might have stayed. The core could have remained intact. They might have eventually broken through and won a championship. Instead, they fell apart quickly and completely. Gary Payton spent the rest of his prime trying to recapture that magic, but never did until the final year of his career with Miami. The Sonics became a cautionary tale about treating every season as precious, about maintaining hunger after tasting success, about recognizing that tomorrow's opportunities aren't guaranteed. The collapse also represented the end of Seattle's golden era of basketball. The franchise had been competitive for years, entertaining fans with exciting, athletic basketball. The 1995 to 1997 teams were the peak, the closest they came to ultimate success. When that team disintegrated, so did Seattle's championship hopes. The city would lose its team entirely a decade later, the legacy of Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp becoming a bittersweet memory. What could have been haunts Seattle fans to this day, a reminder of how quickly everything can fall apart when a team loses its way. And so these 4 collapses remind us that even the brightest moments can dim. Championships promised but never delivered. Superstars who couldn't coexist. Teams that had everything except the one thing that mattered most: unity, hunger, or fortune. As you drift into sleep, let these stories settle softly. They teach us that failure isn't final, that disappointment shapes futures, and that every collapse holds quiet lessons. Rest now, knowing that even in sports, as in life, tomorrow offers another chance to rebuild.